I never thought that at 53 my life would take this turn. After Sarah moved in and married Daniel last spring, the house seemed too big and quiet. I'd grown accustomed to the emptiness, finding solace in the familiar routine of morning coffee on the porch, afternoon gardening, evenings with my mystery novels. This Wednesday began like any other. Rain pounded on the windows as I went through old photo albums in my bedroom. Photos of Sarah's childhood spread out on my quilt, her first steps, school plays, graduation, memories imbued with sweetness. A knock on my bedroom door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. "Come in," I called out, hastily wiping away a tear. It was Robert, my son-in-law, standing awkwardly in the doorway. His tall figure seemed out of place among my floral curtains and antique furniture. "Margaret, I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "Sarah asked me to pick up her old magazines while she's at the conference." I nodded, pointing with a gesture to the bookshelf. Top shelf, behind the blue box. He crossed the room, and I noticed how he moved with careful slowness, as if afraid to disturb the air around him. We had never been alone together before. Our interactions had always been brightened by Sarah's presence, holiday gatherings, and family dinners. As he reached for the shelf, a picture slipped out of my scrapbook. Sarah at 16, laughing by the lake where Thomas was teaching her to swim. Before cancer took him, before I became both mother and father to our daughter. Robert bent down to reach for her. "She has his smile," he said softly. The remark caught me off guard. In the 5 years we'd known each other, Robert had never once mentioned Thomas. Sarah had said he was uncomfortable with this ghost of a man he'd never met, but whose absence had defined our lives. "Yes," I whispered, "yes." He sat down next to me on the bed, at a respectful distance, and asked, "Will you tell me about him?" Something burst inside me, the dam I'd erected years ago. Words poured out about Thomas, his terrible jokes, his passion for teaching, how he could fix anything with duct tape and optimism. Robert listened, really listened, in a way no one had listened in years. "Sarah doesn't talk about him much," Robert admitted. "I think she's afraid it will hurt me somehow, that she'll be disloyal." "To you?" I asked. "I've always wanted to know the man who raised such an extraordinary woman. Actually, 2 extraordinary women." The compliment warmed me. We talked for several hours, forgetting about diaries. I showed him Thomas's old fishing tackle, still stored in the garage. He told me about losing his father young, about being raised by a single mom working 2 jobs. When Sarah called that evening, worried about the diaries, Robert replied with a laugh, "Your mom used to tell me stories. Did you really put frogs in your principal's desk?" Their shared laughter healed something in me. For years I had seen Robert as the man who had taken my daughter away from me. That day I began to see him as the man who could help bring her back, not physically, but emotionally, bridging the careful distance we'd maintained since Thomas's death. Sunday, they came over for dinner. As Sarah helped me in the kitchen, she whispered, "What did you tell Robert? He's been asking about Dad all week." "I just told him the truth," I replied, "that your father would adore him." Her eyes filled with tears. "Really, they're alike in the things that matter." Later, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies, Robert mentioned renovating their spare bedroom. "We're thinking of turning it into a nursery," he said quietly. My heart sank. A nursery. Sarah took my hand. "We wanted you to be the first to know. We're expecting a baby." In that moment, I felt Thomas's presence so strongly, I could almost see him standing behind them, glowing with pride. Life goes on, expands, making room for joy even in the midst of loss. That unexpected day with Robert changed everything. What began as an awkward encounter became a turning point. For years, I had defined myself by what I had lost: my husband, my youth, my daughter who had passed away. Now I was gaining something new, a sincere relationship with my son-in-law, a grandchild on the way, and the realization that family is not static, but constantly evolving. Now, as I approach my 54th birthday, I am redecorating the guest room, installing a crib and rocking chair. Sarah calls daily with questions about pregnancy and parenting. Robert drops by occasionally to chat with me or to help with repairs around the house that Thomas could handle. Last week he brought me a small wooden box he had made in his workshop. Inside was a handmade fishing lure, similar to the ones Thomas used to make. "I was thinking that someday we could take a kid fishing," he said. "You could teach us both." Now I keep that box on my nightstand. It's a reminder that grief and joy are not opposing forces, but intertwined threads of the same tapestry. Sometimes the most meaningful connections come when we least expect it, in ordinary moments made sacred by simple human connection. The rain still taps on the window on quiet afternoons. The house still feels too big sometimes. But now these spaces are not empty, but hold possibility. And when I look at the old photos, I no longer see just what was lost, but the foundation for what is being built, a family that transcends blood and birth into something chosen, intentional, and deeply loved.